Hi guys, Whitney here. I am the Director of Investor Education here at passiveinvesting.com. And you have joined me in our How to Invest in Passive Real Estate series, where we show you how to build passive income and long-term wealth through real estate investment. So let's just dive in here. Maybe you've tried to invest passively before, but couldn't quite get comfortable making the investment, or you've actually invested passively before and realized you made a mistake, or you're just so overwhelmed by all the information out there, all the terms and everything that you just don't know how to even get started. If that's you, you are in the right place. Because here we help you demystify the biggest myths around passive investing that keep investors sidelined. And we help you learn all the different terms, pros and cons, and even the math behind passive investing so you can avoid making costly mistakes. And we show you how to put that knowledge to use so you can confidently invest in your first or even next investment. So let's go ahead and crush two myths right now around passive investing. And that is, number one, passive investors or investors tell themselves that if they invest passively, I have no control over the asset. And yeah, when you invest passively, you give up an element of day-to-day operational control of the asset, but there are so many investment decisions that you make beforehand, before you even get in an investment, that you do own and you have an immense amount of control over. So much more than you do if you invest in an index fund or a stock bond or mutual fund. Come on, guys. If you're still investing in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, you have no control over the day-to-day operations of that business entity. You're giving up 100% control. In real estate, you get to choose who your operator is, the markets you invest in, the strategies you invest in, and the actual deal that gets funded. The second myth behind passive investing that investors tell themselves is that I won't make that high of a return. And that's simply not true either. Okay, we are going to bust through part of this myth today. All right, and I love passive investing. And this picture epitomizes the exact reason why I do have so much of my portfolio weighted in passive investments, is so I can spend time with my crazy crew here. And, you know, it wasn't always like that. I started off real estate investing in 2002 very actively, fix and flipping and live-in flipping. And my husband joined me in a few projects. And it really took us a long time to realize what we needed wasn't actually so much equity build, but we needed cash flow. We needed a balanced blend of both. So we thought the only way we could get access to that was to buy our own rentals, our own single family and small multifamily rentals. Little did we know that a few years later that we could actually access passive investments in real estate. We could invest passively where we're investing in an operating business where other professionals are finding the deal for us. We're getting to utilize their entire network. We're getting to utilize their credit lending and just expertise to access a big deal that we otherwise couldn't do ourselves. So fast forward today, we are in partners in over 6,300 multifamily units and 1,400 self-storage units. But these are just vanity metrics, okay? What the result is that we have 100% control and choice over how we spend our time. Okay, guys, this isn't about necessarily like retiring and laying on the beach and drinking margaritas and Mai Tais, whatever, your choice of beverage is. This is not about never working again. This is about having freedom of choice and control over what you do with your time. And for me, I choose to be here with you guys and teach you about real estate and about passive investing in particular. And here at passiveinvesting.com, we can actually help you build this portfolio. We've invested in over $740 million of real estate. That number is going up incrementally every single month. We've acquired more than 4,200 doors under management, and we have a wealth of investors in these deals that are, very successful and very happy. So I do this series for you guys to help you with education, right? How can I get you from point A, where you are right now, to point B, being knowledgeable and comfortable with the ins and outs of passive investing to be able to make your first or next investment, okay? This is education. We will talk a little bit about finances. We will talk a little about legal and tax, especially today. But this is not advice. I need to make sure that I drive that point home. So you need to take this information back to your team and consult with them before making any sort of investment decision. Understand how this information applies to your particular situation. All right, guys, let's talk about the different ways that you can fund your investment in a passive deal. Now, there's actually 4 different ways. We're going to talk intimately about 3 ways today, but let's just cover these at a high level. So you can invest as an individual. This is just you yourself. The title goes into your name. You can invest jointly with like a spouse or a communal partner. You can invest through a business or entity. Now, this can be a trust, an LLC, or a retirement account like a self-directed IRA. Now, there is a 4th type here called a retirement plan, and these are usually kind of relegated to like solo 401ks or qualified retirement plans, QRPs. Now, those retirement plans are going to operate pretty closely to a business, okay? But it's a 4th distinctive way to invest, okay? But it operates very closely to an entity. Now, why is it important that you understand when you make your investment into a passive investment, how you invest? Well, when you make that election to invest, either as an individual, joint, or entity, you are essentially making an election on how you want to take the cash flow and the equity in the deal. You're making an election on how the tax benefits and the tax impacts will flow to you. You're also making an election on how that asset could transfer to your heirs. And you are possibly making an election on how that asset is shielded from creditors and predators. Now, again, you need to partner with your legal and tax team to understand how all of this could affect your personal situation. But let me help you kind of demystify each one of the investment options for you. That way you can kind of weigh the pros and cons and understand what works best for you. So if you invest as an individual, this type of investment goes really quickly because there's only one reviewer and signer on the document. So it's super easy, super streamlined. Distributions, any sort of distributions, whether it's cash flow or equity, capital gains at the sale of the project, those all go back to your personal bank account. Okay, so that's awesome. So you have full access to those pretty much immediately. Any of the tax benefits, like if the investment has performed a cost segregation and there's accelerated tax benefits that are coming back to the partnership, okay, those tax benefits will flow to you personally onto your 1040. And any asset transfer, okay, will be dictated by either your will, your trust, or your state. Okay, so that is something that's a little bit different when investors start and make their first or second investment. Oftentimes they'll come back and ask us, hey, where can I designate my beneficiaries of this? We don't do this since it's a direct investment into an operating business. We don't handle that on our end. There's no beneficiary designation form. So you need to talk to your legal team to understand how, like, if something should happen to you personally, what would dictate the flow of that asset, the transfer to the asset to your heirs. So that raises some questions for us that you need to get answered. One, if you invest as an individual, do you need any sort of asset protection? Okay, what is your risk and liability out in the world, and how does taking ownership of your first investment or next investment in your name affect that? 2, are there any communal laws that apply in your state? Do you live in a state like California or New York where there's communal property laws? Okay, because if there are, more times than not, we need to actually ask for you to invest jointly and have your spouse sign on, or a communal partner sign on those documents. And last question is, do you have a way to transfer the asset to your heirs? Okay, now there is a default way here. Your state has a way of transferring assets to heirs, okay, through some sort of probate in the courts. Now, you can actually implement an instrument like a trust or a will to help direct that. But all states have a default way of transferring assets. It just really depends if you want to have a say. Now, if you invest jointly, this type of investment strategy goes pretty quickly as well. There's, two people generally that sign on this, like you and your spouse, you and your communal partner. Okay, distributions as well can go back to the personal bank account, not a problem there. The tax benefits will flow through to the 1040 as well. And then assets here are owned jointly, okay? Generally like tenants in common or a joint investment. Now, again, some of the same questions still apply here. Do you need some sort of asset protection? Okay, what is your potential liability out in the world? Do you have a plan in case there's a divorce? Okay, if you, heaven forbid, split up with your communal partner, how are assets going to get divvied up? Have you guys had that conversation? Okay, I encourage people to have that conversation up front. And again, do you have a way of transferring assets to your heirs if something, heaven forbid, should happen to both of you? Because again, your state does, and it depends on if you want to have any sort of say in that transfer. All right. Now, investing as an entity. We're going to break this up into two different parts. One, we're going to look at the trust or an LLC. If you're investing through a trust or a limited liability company, there's generally like only one signer, so it goes pretty fast. Okay, distributions will go back to that entity bank account. Okay, it should not come to you personally. It needs to go back to a bank account for that entity. Tax benefits will flow to the entity as well, not to the individual. Okay, asset protection and asset transfer will be determined by the entity structure. Okay, this could be the actual trust documents or the operating agreement for the LLC. Now, if the deal is a 506C deal, C as in Charlie, okay, this is a deal that is open only to accredited investors. You will be required, you will probably have to provide an accredited letter. You will need to, provide an accredited letter. That much is for certain. But you'll need to provide a letter for either the entity to qualify or for all beneficiaries or members of the entity. Okay, so those are two different ways you can get your entity qualified. Either the entity qualifies on its own or all the members that are the beneficiaries of that entity qualify as an accredited investor. All right, now we got investing as an entity part 2, which is a self-directed IRA. Okay, and while this is an entity, it's a for-benefit trust account. Now, a lot of investors that I've run across that invest through a self-directed IRA, they think the money that's in their IRA is theirs, and it's really not. It's still very much in government control. So hence the reason why when it's locked up in this, Roth or traditional IRA type account or, some other sort of like self-directed IRA, that's why that IRA has to be placed with a custodian because it's not your money. It's technically still the government's until you pay taxes on it. So there's a lot of fees and rules, okay? And those are going to be dictated by the self-directed IRA custodian. Now, each custodian is different. So it takes a little bit of understanding. It's hard for us to guide you individually on exactly what the process is. But let me give you some highlights here that could really make this a smoother process for you. If you are going to invest through a self-directed IRA, contact your IRA immediately and understand their investment process because each one is so different. Okay, their timelines are different too. Some IRA, self-directed IRA companies can move very quickly to sign documents and release funds. Other IRA companies take weeks, okay, 4, 5, 6 weeks to do so. Now, the average time I find is probably somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks. So if you're going to invest through a self-directed IRA, I encourage you to commit to the deal early in the process, not only to lock up your spot, but also so you can start this clock moving forward. Now, your custodian, since it's not your money, your custodian more than likely is going to have to sign the private placement memorandum and the operating agreement for the investment on your behalf. Okay, so this means you got to get the process started early. Don't delay, don't sit on the legal documents or anything like that. Review them, get your questions answered, and get them over to your self-directed IRA provider. Okay, When the distributions happen, you need to make sure those distributions are going back to your self-directed IRA account. I've seen investors goof up and make those put the directions for the distributions to come back to them personally. Okay, that's in violation of your account. There are penalties for that. One of the largest penalties is that you might blow apart your IRA entirely. Okay, so make sure when you are filling out the documentation for your self-directed IRA account and they ask you, where do you want your distributions going? You put the information for your self-directed IRA account. Now, that brings up a really great point, is that each self-directed IRA account will have a different methodology on how they handle distributions. So make sure that you give over their exact directions. All right, tax benefits. Now, those will flow through, okay, to the for benefit account, okay, your entity, your self-directed IRA, okay? Now, you don't get to take advantage of the tax benefits, okay? They're just going to accrue until such time that you reposition the asset, or the asset sells, or the operator repositions the asset, or the asset sells. Okay, so make sure to keep track of all that documentation, but you don't get to use it personally. All right, now here's a little tricky thing about self-directed IRA accounts. Okay, I wish I knew this before I started investing in a self-directed IRA account, but make sure to have a conversation with your self-directed IRA provider around what we call unrelated debt financing income tax, which can trigger what we call a U-bit tax on the account. Think of it this way. If you're investing in a tax advantage asset like real estate, and you put it in a tax advantage account like a self-directed IRA, Roth, or traditional account, you could be subject to taxes. So it goes back to third grade math. -1 times -1 actually equals +1. So make sure you have a conversation with your self-directed IRA provider. Now, they can actually, potentially between them and your accountant, help you do the math, because this tax, while it does hit, remember, you're accruing tax benefits that can help you offset some of these taxes as well within the account. Okay, so it shouldn't be seen as something to completely deter you from investing through a self-directed IRA account. Okay, but just make sure that you're working with your professionals to fully understand how that might impact you. Now, again, like the other entity, like a trust and LLC, if the deal is a 506C and Charlie deal, okay, an accredited deal, you will need an accredited letter for the entity and or all of the owners or trustees of that entity, okay? So either the account has to qualify on its own, or all the owners or trustees of the entity will actually have to qualify as an accredited investor. Usually no problem to do that, pretty simple. All right, now let's kind of put a little pretty bow on this. Okay, we walked through all the different options of investing, how you can actually fund your deal. Now, why, what kind of leads you through a decision-making process to understand how you should invest? Well, let's wrap it up. You need to ask yourself, do you need the cash flow and equity now or later? Okay, if you want it now, maybe investing as an individual, joint, or a trust or LLC works great. If you're okay with having it later, then maybe investing through a self-directed IRA works for you. Same question here. Do you need the tax benefits or impacts now, or do you need them later? Also, what kind of asset transfer do you need? Okay, are you okay with allowing your will or your estate dictate things? Or do you want to have it more pretty bow put on it and have like your trust or your LLC documents help dictate asset transfer? Okay, and then what type of level of asset protection do you need? All right, so make sure to have a conversation with your legal and tax team before you make this type of investment. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining with me today. I've got some special goodies for you over at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. Checklists, ebooks, and also you can hop on the phone with me. I can answer additional questions for you about passive investing, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.